Both.
Hello, everyone. Glad y'all can join us tonight. We're going to be talking about Delphi and the murders of Libby and Abby. We're going to be discussing some of the strategies of law enforcement um, that were implemented at the time and some of the changes over the years and what we uh, research has shown and what possibly should be and as soon as possible, in my opinion, should be the next strategy that should be implemented and hopefully bring some closure to this case. But as always, whenever we're talking about certain cases and things, let's not use any names in chat or initials or anything because we don't want to influence anyone that might have an opinion of who their tip or lead is on. And so if y'all just keep that in mind, we'll get to it.
Ready?
We're ready.
Whoa. Let's try that.
Okay. All right. But just a brief introduction. I'm Steve. I'm a retired law enforcement, 20 years of service. I worked in all areas of law enforcement. Started off my career in the jail, worked road, and worked my way into investigations. Was trained in a lot of different disciplines throughout my career. Took a lot of different courses. Was a SWAT team member. Did everything from an entry leader to a counter sniper. I've also received extensive training in crime scenes. Was a state certified crime scene tech, and I've invested there almost any kind of case you can imagine, from minor cases all the way up to homicides. But I'm retired now and decided to become as good of an ambassador as I can between law enforcement and the web sleuth world, and I'll try to work with as many other YouTube creators as I can, and to get so that we can have as good and as great an impact as we can on these cases that we look at and bring awareness not only to the victims but to the families, and so that, like I say, we can have a great impact. But tonight we're going to be talking about some of the things that law enforcement does, and when you first get to some of these cases and you're looking at when you arrive on any type of major case, such as most certainly occurred when the bodies were discovered of Libby and Abby. And there's a lot of things that happen, I mean, all at once. You've got a lot of personnel that's responding to the scene. You've got a lot of families that will become aware of the situation, especially since, you know, we had search parties out there that were looking for these two missing children at the time, not knowing that they had met the fate that they did, that they had crossed paths with a psychopath that murdered them. And so when all this comes and to the realization that you have law enforcement that's been notified of a death, they respond and they start following their training, their protocols, and start securing that scene. It's extremely hectic there to begin with. And it's not like what you see on TV or, you know, even on the news and everything. By the time you see a lot of this stuff that is going on, there's been a time where everything is starting to settle out and law enforcement is getting a grasp of the situation. But there's a lot of different areas that have to be covered, and that's what law enforcement training should most, you know, is focused on, is how can we gain the upper hand as quickly as we can on the situation so that we can control what evidence is there. The public, how can we secure and get our personnel, get our equipment in so that we can protect everything at that scene the best that we can. And it's extremely, you know, you have the first officer getting there, and before he even gets to wherever the person that may have called it in, you know, there's other people that may have come into the scene and continue to contaminate or destroy, or, you know, just not meaning to harm the investigation, but ultimately that's what happens in a lot of cases. And it's, you know, like I said, there's first moments of when law enforcement becomes aware of these situations. There's a lot of things that have to happen, and it has to happen quickly. But you'll have the securing of those first responding officers. They'll start putting up that tape, start working and keeping a log of personnel as they arrive. You'll have the investigators when they arrive. They'll be taking charge and they'll be setting out and talking to other personnel. You'll have families a lot of time that's on the scene that have to be notified and spoken to, and trying to figure out not only from notifying the family of what happened, but going from a missing person to a homicide, such as what Libby and Abby were, that we have to immediately go to a victimology of what and who is possibly responsible for this case, and start understanding where the case goes and who we have to be looking for immediately. All right. What we got here?
We got.
All right. Thank you, Concrete Day. Appreciate all your support there. It means a lot to us, and it helps us in so many different ways. But thank you. But once law enforcement gets there and they start doing the taking control of the situation, and the other personnel start showing up, and everybody understands and they've worked together, the longer and the team has worked together, the more fluid it is, and it's not as chaotic. And if some of the smaller jurisdictions won't have that many homicides and everything, so it can be extremely chaotic, especially for someone that's never been around a lot of death. But the other side of the coin is that if you have a lot of it and you become a well-oiled machine, it does run far smoother, but it also, you have more victims within a community. So it's just bad either way. It doesn't matter. These scenes have such a horrible impact on a community. But once law enforcement gets in there and they're working, and all right, Derek. Hey, Derek, thank you. That means a lot. Your support and everything, and I appreciate the emails that we've passed back and forth and this last week. But as law enforcement gets the supported personnel there, and you start getting CSI, the crime scene units there, and they start working on and start getting their equipment moved into position and start looking at the scene, there's a lot of stuff that's going on. You're also that you'll have your lead investigators that's setting up there that has assignments, and crime scene units out there, and they have their assignment. They know what to do, and they don't have to rely upon and communicate to each other. That with a well-oiled team, certain individuals immediately, they know what their job title is, what they're supposed to do. You just show them the path, they're on it, and it's taken care of. And then the lead investigators that's up there in the command center, they'll start making people do everything from going around to stations and securing security footage from residences. And as technology advances, there's far more cameras and systems out there. But there'll be certain personnel that'll be trying to get support personnel in there, and what agencies are we going to contact, and what personnel with other local agencies do we need here. And you'll be talking to everybody that as the case evolves, that we'll be looking at, what type of information do we need? And that may be that we have to have search warrants. We need a DA. We start obtaining subpoenas for cell tower data. Are you trying to get that everything's pointing towards a certain individual or a certain residence? Because on a lot of what we used to call smoking gun crimes, a lot of times within the first hour exactly who is responsible for certain crimes, and so you have to start securing secondary residences and securing them until you can get the proper paperwork so you can conduct searches. But when you don't have a known, then of course there's other information you have to do, from putting out lookouts for certain vehicles, persons, talking to witnesses, doing neighborhood canvasses, and it's just absolutely unbelievable what has to be done in such a short period. And as we spoke in some of the previous videos, that it is extremely chaotic to start with. But all of this is part, and it's not part of a strategy. This is just part of law enforcement training. But this information leads into that you have this final report, and you have this book of knowledge of everything you know about that crime scene. And from that crime scene, from the victim, from the suspects, from the witnesses, that you got all this information, and then you take your and how are we going to use that information? What information are we going to release to the public? Who are our suspects? How are we going to do interviews? And all of this is part of the strategy that law enforcement will use. And most certainly with the Delphi murder, that the lead agency may not be Indiana State Police, but the perception of the public is, because Carter, Superintendent Carter, most certainly is probably the most one person that's been in the forefront of all the media coverage as much as possible, and he's a great spokesman, and lays out where they're at, and has tried to do his best of getting the information out there. And so when we look at the things that he did, their first strategy, and this first strategy lasted the first couple of years, and everyone thought that this crime, like we've said numerous times, was going to be solved in the first days, in the first week. And but it didn't turn out to be that, of course. And now we're going on 5.5, going on, almost 6 years now. But on that first strategy, they did everything that I don't have a problem with. Anything they did that first 2 years, with what I know and cases I've seen, and not only cases I worked, but other cases that I was part of that we looked at in training and otherwise, and we did reviews of the cases and how it was handled, the processing of evidence, the interviews, and you see all these cases and stuff. I don't have one bit of problem with what their strategy A was at that time, from releasing the sketch, releasing video, audio, wanting information from the public. All the news briefings, it seemed to be that they were out there trying to get the message out as much as possible. And of course, you have on the evidence blackouts, that they're holding stuff close to their chest so that it won't possibly jeopardize the case, and also can filter through some of those false confessions. And so that's done. And all these agencies came together, and it was a multi-agency push. I mean, they said it was like something they'd never experienced before. And thank you. Once again, we appreciate all y'all's support, everything. It means a lot to us. We'll use it as we go forward in promoting and trying to have an impact on our cases that we'll be talking about at the end, that as our channel grows and we start stepping out into other paths and avenues of how we want our channel to go, that everything and all our support, we appreciate it. But all these agencies came together, and FBI and everything, that they brought all the resources in and all the personnel in. No one could say, all right, thank you, Concrete, once again. But as we make these strategies, and there's certain things that are done so that the public is aware and they can try to help with the case as much as possible, because when they put that information out there about looking at the sketches, looking at the video, listening to the audio, that most certainly they want what they think is their best strategy to solve this case. And so they did that for 2 years. But then after the 2 years, and we get into the next strategy, and which has caused, everybody can look at the case. You can watch the videos of the news agencies doing interviews after that briefing, of where they, flipped the deck and went into a new direction. And Carter went out there and stated, "We're going in a new direction." That the bad guy never expected that they would flip around and do such a thing, and nobody did. And like I said, you can see that shock in the community. You can see the shock with the family. And is that necessary at times? Evidently, they thought it was necessary at that time, that they was going in this new direction, and they had some information that they considered was critical. And that information led them down strategy B, which some of it is the exact same as what the first was, that other than they changed and went to a brand new sketch. No longer was it the older bridge guy. Now we have a younger sketch and Carter says is it's the same person, and that there's many parts of that sketch that's going to be similar. Wasn't quite as clear now when he first said that of what it meant, that, combining the two and take them away and you'll have your suspect. So there was some confusion in there, but they've clarified a little bit since then. But they still have the audio, the video, but then they released that they turned 180 degrees from where they were beginning, that didn't have anything to do with social media, that it does, that this case is hinging and is focused upon the social media connection of possible Libby and Abby being catfished. And so this opened up a whole new investigative pathway. When then, after, we become aware even later of the transcripts that had the information, and you can see even from the search warrants and things that were issued at the beginning of the case that this social media connection was known from the get-go. And it just how much information they had and how it was shared and who had knowledge of it and what importance and weight they gave it was limited, of course. But 2 years later, they decided, no, we're going to give it a lot more weight than we ever previous had, and now we're going in this new direction. And once again, they asked and request for information from the public, and not only just on the Anthony Schatz account that was through the chats and some of the social media, but there was other channels or other platforms out there that they were looking at, and and so it was very confusing, and they still want that information. They still have the news briefings. They still have the exact same evidence blackout. They're not sharing anything other than letting everybody know that there is a social media connection, and we're going down this new pathway. And we think that the new sketch is going to help. And it's still a multi-agency push at that time. So neither one of these two sketches or two strategies, A and B, has always relied upon since that first week when they did the first news briefings, when they said, all we need is one tip to solve this. And most certainly, as I've said before, I've never worked a case in my life that the right one tip wouldn't have solved. And that's what they're looking for. Strategy A didn't get that one tip in there. Strategy B hasn't brought that one tip in there. And I hope it has, and they just haven't shared that with us. But it appears at this junction in time that they're still at, unaware and don't know which way to go currently. And so I looked at and I thought, well, what would be their next strategy? That if they're going to change something, where would they go with this case? And I looked to the professionals, and the strategy C that I looked at and that we're going to discuss tonight isn't just made up by me, a retired law enforcement officer. It's not made up by other YouTubers. The strategy C is a strategy that was compiled from our very own and collective knowledge of all law enforcement officers out there, and along with the FBI. We have the best practices for implementing and sustaining a cold case investigation unit. And I know a lot of people that are watching this are going to take issue when anything is mentioned about Delphi being a cold case. You can call it whatever you want to. I don't care. It has nothing to do if it's cold case or not. But the basis of looking at this is that the implementation of how you work a cold case is what you're going to work this case at, in the same general knowledge and bringing the people to bear to focus on it. You could say it was a hot case that's been worked for 5.5 years, and it's still just as hot as it was the day after. I don't care. You still have to implement certain strategies and certain personnel into it, that what you've done for 5.5 years hasn't worked. So what does the collective of all these professional agencies, the National Institute of Justice, the U.S. Department of Justice, the FBI, what procedures would they use to bring a new strategy in that will solve something that is extremely hard to solve, which is self-evident for the fact that it's been 5.5 years and nothing's come of it. And so we have to go to what the cold case roundtables are, and that they're difficult to resolve. And so you have these that you'll be having personnel from across the board of different agencies, and there's a very critical sentence within this cold case roundtable that is great importance. It says that that many agencies have discovered that additional input from persons not involved in the investigation is beneficial. And so you have to get away from that. The only people that need to know the information are the ones that are working on the case. Sometimes you just have to step back and recognize that we've done the best we can. And there's nothing wrong with putting your best foot forward. But there's nothing wrong also with recognizing that sometimes you can get tunnel vision and you can be focused so far and so much on one path that you'll overlook the obvious. And when you put new eyes on it, someone that's never seen the case, that they may see one word or one sentence or one fingerprint or one blood spatter that is an outlier that stands out that says, hey, what about this? We need to look in this direction. And so these cold case roundtables are extremely important, and recognizing that, that the people working on the case may be your brightest, most brilliant, but there's other people out there just as bright and just as brilliant that can work this case that's not involved in the case. And sometimes it's just a matter of sucking it up and moving on and saying, okay, let's, for the betterment of this, let's step forward. All right. Thank you once again. And I appreciate it. That means a lot to us and for y'all's support. And there's going to be a lot of expenses whenever you do cold cases, and a lot of the terminology that's in this is, of course, focused towards cold cases. But Carter's already said that at a certain point that they would go out and hire, I think it was like 60 to 80 something more personnel to go back and look at everything at a certain point when they solve this case or whatever. Well, it's going to be expensive to do it after you solve it, so you might as well do it before you solve it, and let's get it solved now. Let's not wait, because we don't have that one tip that's come in yet. And if you do have that one tip that's already come in, bring all that personnel to bear now. If you don't have it, bring that personnel to bear and let's do it. That's what the Department of Justice, FBI, and the cold case best practices says to do. That you have the operational expenses, you're going to have investigative expenses, the evidence analysis, the expert testimony, and that, it's not cheap to work a homicide. And because there's a lot of man hours involved in it, and people that make mistakes, you just want the top of the line, the best that you can spend, and the best return on your investment of that dollar. And go out there and find these professionals to help you on your case. There's a lot of processes and the time and resources that have to be dedicated to this. And I'm not going to bore you with reading this, because this is all from the manual stuff. The government's great at creating, to tell you that you need to create a round table, and then they'll take 50 pages of text to tell you exactly how to create a round table. That's government for you. But just surround yourself with good people that are trained in a lot of different disciplines, and you will get a good result. But and this here is recommended resources for inclusion in a multidisciplinary team to review unsolved cases. You got your cold case investigator, forensic scientists, prosecutors, victim specialists, advocates, medical examiner, crime scene reconstructionists, behavioral analysts, crime analysts, intelligence analysts, and academics. And you get these people together to look at this information. And this highly intelligent people, the collective IQ of such a structure and such a group of people, with law enforcement training to look in certain areas and having the resources, not only of their own mind, but other people that they have worked with in the past, so that they can call and bounce different ideas off of. Because I worked with a lot of brilliant people in my career, and I appreciate it. They made me look extremely good in a lot of most always. Like I said, I understood that I was never the smartest man in the room, but I think there's a famous man out there that says that. But it is also good to be able to identify the smartest man in the room, and I was always able to do that. That when I was talking on a certain subject and somebody spoke up, I realized who had the most expertise in certain areas, and I'd use that, and it worked extremely well throughout my career. But that's about as much as we're going to talk about for the before we get into taking answers and questions. But Mrs. Steve here has got update on the Cyclops stuff, and she's been working hard on it. And I felt so sorry for her. There was 500 and something.
Y'all please say a prayer for Nebraska. We have 546 entries. That is way too many missing and murdered kids. But I guess the good news is it's up. We are at 12 completed, 13's in the process, and should be up the next 2 or 3 days. Then I'm waiting on one more. So slowly but surely, we're moving in the right direction. Now, my ask of you is that if you go and to the website and look at these, if you see something that a child was found that we still have on the list, please send an email to Steve at truecrimeweb.com so that I can go in there and remove that. I'm putting them up so fast. I honestly have not gone back and looked to see if any of the kids were found yet. So just let me know if you see anything, and if you see anything funky, email Steve and we'll take care of that for you. And thank you again for your help on Cyclops. Yep. There is absolutely no way I could do that by myself.
Yep, absolutely. You have our respect and appreciation always. And then we also want to tell everybody that everyone that's given us, and we appreciate it, and it's going to mean a lot, because as we move forward in our with our other programs that we've got, I've been contacted. I think I've got 3 cold cases of different families that have contacted me that wish for me to look at their murdered children, and so I've been talking to them. Talked to a lot of different other professionals. Thank you.
Proud to be a Steve Spider with a Y. I like that, Concrete J.
That's great.
Might have to use that.
Yeah. And but we as we move forward and we're looking at other avenues, and as we try to help these families, and I talk to them, and I've got to get my calendar set up so that I can go out, and I think I got 5 stops to make from Indiana all the way through Iowa and back down to Texas. But as we go forward with it, I'll be letting and sharing and as much as I can without jeopardizing the case or the security, because sometimes as we move forward on looking at some of these cases, we most certainly don't want to jeopardize anything about what LE law enforcement has done. Thank you, Tracy. It means a lot. And
thank you for helping me mod.
Yeah, Tracy, appreciate it. And we have such great support out there, and we thank y'all. But back to our case here about Lydia and Abby. I just want, like I said, thank everybody out there for everything you do. It means a lot to us. But if you have any information and you have an idea of what or who or bridge guy, if you've held back that information for all this time, and you can't decide if you should or shouldn't call it in, call it in. It doesn't matter. You shouldn't be 50-50. And I mean, if you just have an inkling of a suspicion of someone, call it in, for the fact that law enforcement will make the final decision. And it's nothing on you, but this psychopath, this predator that did this to these 2 children shouldn't be on the street. And whatever information you have, no matter how little or how minor it is, we have to look towards it and make sure that we get that information to the proper authorities. All right.
All right. First one. Molly at Steve. Do they have DNA, fingerprints, hair sample, question mark, of LE so they can distinguish when evidence is analyzed? If they do you know when that started?
I don't know if they do on this case, but most certainly everyone that, if they ever, all the cases which law enforcement uses certain procedures and tries to protect that scene as best as possible. But if you did go into certain, like with the GBI, their agents, that I work with, they told me, they said that anytime they was there, that they had all their DNA profiles were on, were, sequenced and were on file so that they could take their DNA out of it. All the cases that I ever worked, we never had where any DNA came back that wasn't identified to a suspect at some point. So we never had to go in and do the elimination. But there is procedure processes that if you do find something that is not immediately identified as a suspect, that then you go through a process of elimination from your law enforcement. And you just, anyone that was in a certain area of where a print was collected or, you should be gloves up. There shouldn't be a lot of fingerprints of law enforcement around. But sometimes you can have that DNA. You can have those hairs. You can have that fiber that's unknown that can come back to law enforcement. But they do, like I said, it's just a matter of elimination.
In Savannah, victimology seemed to be ignored. Wrong move by LE, in my opinion, dismissing social media so quickly.
And from the information that's known, I cannot get over that either. A parallel investigation of what one out over the other. Was it the FBI's belief that Ron Logan was so involved in it, and that was the focus, and so they turned their back on the possible social media connection. There had to be something that totally turned them against it. But after that ran dry, they went back to the social media.
And Aries Fire. I always drink campfire coffee watching y'all. It's quite relaxing to do both.
Campfire coffee. I don't know if that's a brand or if that's coffee you actually make on a campfire, but
it sounds good.
It sounds good either way.
We'll take coffee like that any day.
Oh, I love my coffee.
All right. And Derek, me as well at Steve. Hey, everyone. You're all on deliveries with me tonight. Sorry if I don't respond to chat as I'm driving. Be careful, Derek.
Thank you, Derek. It means a lot to us.
All right. Let's see here. Art Fox. Let's see here.
Art Fox out there?
Yep.
Hey, Art Fox.
Hey, well, this is Deb. Hey, Deb.
Hey, Deb. I'm glad to see you here. Crime and Shame, Art Fox.
Mm-hmm.
Both Art Fox and Deb.
They came in right at the same time, it looks like.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. All right. Hope y'all are good. Let's see here.
If you get a chance, go check out Art Fox channel, and also check out It's a Crime and Shame with Deb, Adam, and Sonny.
Let's see here. Molly, Carter is somewhat charismatic and you pay attention to him. Good quality. I really agree with Steve that more info needs to come out and that pressure be put on who is holding it back.
Ives, he most certainly said there's evidence to be released out there that wouldn't jeopardize the case. And so I'll side with him that, whatever information can be put out there, that when you look at this new strategy, if you go by what the Department of Justice and suggests, that you have these people look at it and they evaluate what evidence can be released and how key is it to maybe possibly identifying. And, obviously the people in power now think that right now there's nothing else. So whenever they do a review And if they did, as suggested by this panel that's in this best practices, there may be a difference of opinion of what information to be released. And there's no harm in bringing a roundtable together and letting them look at it and saying, this is what should be brought out, and argue it back and forth. There's nothing wrong with arguing. Because it's from that information that a lot of good information and a new strategy could be developed.
And Aries Fire, I went back through my Delphi stuff and turned some things over recently. I encourage folks to go back and look.
Absolutely, because we're now looking at it with 5.5 years of knowledge and debate, and things are changing, technologies are changing, and unfortunately, memories are fading. And before all the memories fade, we need to make sure that the people that this is the best that their minds will ever have of this crime, that, we need to bring focus back onto the case as much as possible.
And this is hilarious. Molly, LOL at Mrs. Steve. It looks like the blue light special at Kmart back in the day when there's a donation. I love it. Thank you, Molly. I like my blue light too. At least I don't have the siren going, right? I could do that.
Yeah, we've discussed that.
I don't know if it'd blow my ears out or not. All right, let's see here. All right, and Barbara, I wish there was more of his voice. I can always recognize the voices of men I know right away.
And I do too. And until they release and they decide to release the full 43 seconds, we don't know what all is on that audio portion of the or the audio track of that video. And we most certainly would need that. And I'm hoping they do have more. And just show it. I mean, if there's something that, that doesn't have to be heard, most certainly edit it out. But as much of the bridge guy voice that's out there, we need is every second of his voice that can be heard to be heard.
And William, they don't like social media because it keeps the heat on them for being incompetent.
Well, like I said, they kept it quiet for 2 years, or and shocked the family saying it wasn't involved, and then turned 180 and it is involved. And most, it is something that they have to live with. And they can't deny that law enforcement can't deny they played a part in creating that atmosphere that, people will hold you accountable. And if you help create that atmosphere of loss of confidence, there's nothing to be said. You have to be very clear of why you do certain things. And they weren't, in my opinion, very clear on it.
All right. And Molly at Steve, do you think LE is purposely leaking the documents over the past few months, or someone going rogue within LE justice system with access?
It could be either or, but I have to give credit to it regardless, whatever, because when those leaked documents came out, or any information that comes out is leaked, it brings such a tremendous amount of focus back on this case. And that focus on this case has to be a positive for the fact that it keeps people aware of the case, and as many eyes on the case as possible. And it may even drive our predator to ground, that he can't become active for the fact that there's so many eyes out there looking for him. There's so much focus on him. So regardless of the reasoning behind why these documents are being found or being released, and who's releasing them, it doesn't bother me at all, as long as they get out there and the information, and we continue focusing on these two little girls.
In True Crime with Marvin Frank. Hey, y'all. It is cold. It hasn't been solved.
Yes, and
I agree.
It matches all the definition of it. But like I said, a lot of people are going to argue both ways, and that's not the information or what point I want to get out there. The point of that within that manual for how to work the cold case is the best practices of how to address this case. That after 5.5 years, strategy A and B ain't worked. So let's try to come up with a new strategy. And it's laid out there by the professionals. It's not by some YouTuber that has no idea. It's laid out there by the collaboration of all the law enforcement agencies that help develop and come up with these practices.
In Concrete J, do you think in these investigations the squeaky wheel gets the grease? With public outcry, the overworked investigators get a second wind?
Well, the investigators, they always say that we have dedicated investigators to a case, but you have to rotate because sometimes when you change the strategy or whatever, that you have certain investigators that work in the case down a certain path. And now those investigators that's worked that path for 2 years or 4 years, they're so hooked on that path and they have so much knowledge, and it's so hard to reprogram them to look somewhere else because they're going to have prejudices towards certain individuals that he's our guy, they're the bad guys, and it may be, but that's how come you have to come out there and just turn everything upside down every now and then and bring in these new investigators in and try to bring them up to speed. And I know it's difficult at times to do that, but it has to be done, or that you just get stuck in one position, which obviously it appears that we are stuck in a certain position of being unsolved.
And Tweety Bird, Indiana just added a detective to the Delphi case a couple weeks ago.
Excellent. That's the first I'd heard of it. I mean, there's so much information out there. And like I said, as our channel grows and I get people sending me information and wanting me to look at their cases and stuff, I can't keep up with some of the research as much as possible. So most certainly in the comments and when you share this or send me emails, keep me updated as best as possible, because I spend most of the time when I look at some of the other cases I've worked on in the past, the only information I really get is from my supporters and who send and gives me information through email.
All right. And Barbara, Indiana is almost dead last in solving murders.
I saw where they had a low percentage of solved cases, sadly, and I don't know for what reason that is, but most certainly all agencies can improve.
Mm. All right, let's see here. From why does Ellie ever get opinions from experts from other countries, such as Scotland Yard?
Absolutely. And a lot's got to be said for Scotland Yard and some of their investigative techniques that they used over there. They've been breaking into new territories and processing of crime scenes from the get-go. And there's certain processes that I look at and I admire of what they've done over the years, and even how they still address certain crimes and how they operate that I believe is superior to how we operate. But everybody chooses their own path, but there's a lot that, looking at some of these and you might see something that, it may not be exact, but same as what has happened with your case, but just because it's in another country and how they address the issue, like when they had the Yorkshire Ripper that was running around, they did a massive DNA study and donation, or where everyone was requested to come in and contribute and give up DNA in the search. And so most certainly you have to look at the people that's done it and what were the obstacles and what were the shortcomings and how was it defeated, and what to look for when certain suspects may be trying to get other people to pass their DNA rather than they given the DNA that would solve a case.
And True Crime with Marvin Frank. I wish I could get my hands on older conversations and screenshots so I could look at what was being said from the beginning.
and it's
Absolutely.
limited. I go out there, and you go on YouTube, and you have to go back 5 years, almost 6 years now, to find some of the information. And but there's a lot of what we're so limited on what law enforcement has given us. All right. Oh, Concrete, you're on it tonight, ain't bud? I appreciate it. That means a lot to us, and we and
Oh, you got to read that. Steve is a champion of the missing or silence. Finally, these cases have the eyes of a man looking for justice, not a paycheck. He doesn't ask for anything but donations to help. Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I missed that part of it. Appreciate it, man. That means a lot to us. It really does.
All right, so let's see here. Let's see. All right, so now this here Google machine thing just did its awesome thing. Hold on. Hold on.
Poor Mrs. Steve.
Y'all know how good I am at keeping up with these here chatty things when they start doing funky stuff. Well, I don't even know now. Okay, let's see here. Oh my goodness. All right, so I'm just going to start from there because I don't know where it was.
Okay.
All right, so if I miss it, I apologize. Here we go. All right, we got Patricia's putting names in there. We can't put names in the chat.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Please keep names out.
If you have a certain name, then I suggest you email Steve. Privately.
Just privately email me. Keep it out of there, because, like I say, we don't want to influence anyone into that it may be a certain individual. It's fine to say that you may have a suspect, but don't list the names or anything, because, like I said, we don't want to influence anyone and possibly impact someone that may be innocent.
All right, Vanessa Marie. What do you think about the recent tweet from the FBI stating she still thinks it's on Logan?
Well, thinking it and proving it, most certainly, they were there within the first days, and they were never able to prove it. And if you was going to be able to prove it, and if the evidence was there, is the FBI biased? I don't know how involved she was with the case and exactly what her name is. I had seen and have heard on certain channels where they discussed the FBI agent. I don't know what part she played in the investigation. Don't know how responsible that is. But like I said, sometimes investigators get so focused on one individual, and they'll absolutely never open their minds to anyone else. Is that the case for this one? I have no idea. But whatever information she had wasn't enough to prove. And so we have to weigh it for what it is. FBI never could prove it was him. And if anyone could prove it was him, they brought all the guns to bear and had one of the greatest labs in the world, some of the greatest lab technicians, investigators, and weren't able to bring it to and prove it was him at the time, and still haven't proved it.
All right, and CJK, Steve, should a family, in your opinion, follow up monthly with law enforcement asking for updates, pushing for answers and resolution?
I've seen families do it for years daily. No problem with that, and they should. Whatever relationship they have with that department, and I've seen departments mishandle it, that they'll shun or get aggravated with families, and that's a shame, but the departments should pay as much attention and give as much respect to a family as they can. But whatever agreement that family wants to work out with that law enforcement agency, if they say, okay, can you let us know weekly, then the department should let them know weekly. If it's monthly, then of course, but it should be left up to whatever the family and that agency negotiate out. But I've seen families that they want it daily, and I mean, who wouldn't, if you lost a child?
All right. And SD, do you feel disagreement among various agencies early on impeded the investigation?
You know, there's two sides of that coin. Competition builds that everybody wants to solve the case. And then as long as the differing of opinion doesn't create an atmosphere that's unworkable, then there's nothing wrong with competition in a case. But it's only when it starts impeding that you have where people can't go about their jobs without some type of bias or prejudice that will hurt a case. Then you have to take the chain of command, take the steps necessary to squash that. But there's nothing wrong with Team A saying that I'm going to prove so and so did it, and Team B saying no, so and so did it, and I'm going to prove it. There's nothing wrong with that competitiveness in investigations or going out there and getting that piece of evidence. And I don't have a problem with it, only when it gets to the point that it might jeopardize the case that you have to step in.
In Arctic Aries Fire, Ellie requested DNA be fast-tracked on February 22nd, 2017.
And whatever that DNA is and whatever it will be, and hopefully with the new technologies at some point, 5.5 years hasn't been the time frame to solve it yet with the DNA, but hopefully that will come to pass.
This is interesting. Rez Kid, my brother is a detective. He loves you guys. I asked him about this case. Live news coverage interviewing volunteers could very well interview the killer. What do you think?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't care who interviews him, as long as they interview him. And then it'll get back to the true professionals that will do the follow-up and interviews. And but most certainly, has he been talked to? There's been some hints that LE may have talked to him in the past, and has news agencies talked to him, or somebody's talked to Bridge Guys, a family member or otherwise. And I just hope that the person that may have that inkling will step forward.
And the Bible group, Grady Judd would have solved the Delphi case by now?
I am a great fan of that man, Grady Judd. He is a character. He's a sheriff down in Florida.
Oh, that's the one you like.
You can't. I think he says you can't shoot evil enough or kill evil enough.
All right, and Paper Chaser. Is there any higher authority that can go into Indiana and look into and advise on practices and procedures, since there are so many of these troubling cases that seem to be stalled?
It'd be whatever the attorney general, governors, and whatever sheriff's associations want to do. Now, federals can come in if it's something that is determined to be to the point that it's that maybe a family comes in and says it's something that is a prejudice, it's a rights violation that the agency, a local agency, may not be investigating, and it's some type of civil rights issue. I've seen a lot of civil rights issues in my career with agencies that may not investigate a certain offense. Well, the feds will come in once they get the paperwork, and they can step in and conduct an investigation. But that more than likely what it would take for a feds to come in. But as far as the local highest agency within the state, that's all going to be held and handled by the attorney generals within the state.
And Olivia too at Steve. So appreciate your knowledge and videos.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind words and your support.
You want to read that one? When I first talked to Olivia at 8 a.m., but Becky says they didn't get up. You want to do that?
Yeah,
one?
sure.
Okay. All right. So, true crime with Marvin Frank. Steve, in the KK transcripts, it says that he was the last person to talk to Libby at 8 a.m. But Becky says they didn't get up until 9:30 to 10 a.m. Would knowing who she talked to between that time frame help?
And, the timelines of sometimes whenever families say one thing, you know, that's what they believed at the time, and is a big red flag now. You know, families can be off, and they, you know, it's whatever is on that data that's contained on those text messages. That's the true times. And if there was contact made then, that's what it is. A family member that may be overcome with grief and what they believe is the truth has very little impact on that. And law enforcement is not going to say, oh, there's a great conspiracy here of, no, this didn't happen. If there was information from a certain time period that's supported by data that's from cell towers and text messages and applications and contacts, that's what the best evidence is, and that's what law enforcement are based on. Having difficulties there with your Google machine, babe?
No, I'm just reading. All right. Aries Fire's got some things back up top, but I'm going to kind of hook them together. I have sent them out already, meaning he had some information about somebody taking photos at the bridge at 8:30 a.m. that morning. LE isn't releasing them for a reason. They are things in them photos that the public doesn't need to see. Not from me, anyway.
Okay.
So, you know.
I have no idea what those photos are.
I'm not either. All right. So
I haven't seen them. Don't know.
All righty. Let's see here. USA Libertarian. I don't think LE talked to everyone they could in the social media angle. Maybe they finally have recently, but a lot of girls may not even remember by now.
And that's the problem with coming in and not hitting it when everyone would have had all their texts and same phones and same data. But you know, LE played a part in if there's any information out there in that, sadly, but hopefully they were able to gather all of it, because what one piece missed might be the one key piece they need.
I'm with you, Marv. I hate it when the chat and the Google machine go wonky. Me too. Wonky is my new word because it happens every time.
I hadn't heard. We don't use wonky in Georgia much.
We're using wonky tonight because
Okay.
it's definitely wonky. Let's see here. Paper Chaser, YouTuber Stephen Keogh, Murder Academy, is retired from Scotland Yard and did at least one episode on how Scotland Yard would work in Delphi. That would be interesting.
I'm glad you said that. I'll look that up. I'll see.
Stephen Keogh and Murder Academy. Thanks, Paper Chaser. All right, let's see here. And I don't know who KCAP is, but he needs to go away.
Go ahead, and that's
Okay.
the one that.
About
Yeah.
is Sonny Justice crazy?
Yeah.
This is the second one
Yeah.
he's put in there.
If you want to attack other channels, this ain't the channel for you. So bye.
See you, bye. Okay. So we took care of that one. Let's see here. Yep, Molly took care of that. Thank you. Let's see here. Let's see. True Crime with Marvin Frank Murder Academy has done some great videos on Delphi. Okay, so we need to look at that.
Yeah, I hadn't seen them.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much information out there, and there's a lot of great channels, a lot of great information out there. And whatever it takes to solve this case, I'm absolutely for.
In digital. I knew more about this case 3 years ago than I do now.
I'm with you, digital.
That is hysterical.
I'm with you.
That is hysterical. Okay, let's see here. Molly, at Steve. The John Bonet case has seemed to have the police on one side and DA on the other, keeping evidence from each other. Is that hopefully uncommon?
I never heard of anything like what happened out there with John Bonet and that. That is absolutely unbelievable. And what was the reasoning? I have no idea. Um, I I haven't looked into the John Bonet case that much as far as recently. Back when it first happened, I was still in law enforcement during that time period, and there was a lot of information out there we looked at and what was going on. But um, since I've come into the web sleuth world, I hadn't looked at, but I probably will at some point.
All right. USA Libertarian. Does LE tend to work one angle to death, then move to another angle, or are they more usually to work all angles at once?
It depends on the personnel and how they align and what you may have some hot leads towards certain directions. And that if you're a small department and have limited resources, that's how you have to go that way. But when you have 20 something plus agencies plus hundreds of FBI agents, that at the time that this went on and the collaboration of all these agencies working together, of what has commonly been stated as a once in a lifetime law enforcement investigation focus on a crime, that they could have handled 10 or 20 different angles at one time and had, like I've said, they had the personnel. Anybody that as tips came in, they'd give them out and they'd go take care of it. It's absolutely amazing of the resources that was brought to bear on this case. And here we are 5.5 years later with nothing.
Well, Molly, Green River killer was investigated and looked at 15 to 20 years before he was arrested.
Absolutely. And,
I hope that don't happen.
Yeah. And they talked to him, and they had a guy that followed him home and knew his vehicle and dropped the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe Ted Bundy was the same way. Now, BTK, I don't think anybody ever looked at BTK prior to when he was caught, but I believe Ted had, he'd been turned in by his girlfriend and everything. And so has Bridge Guy been interviewed? Quite possibly. And statistically, more than likely, he's in the tips somewhere. And that's the importance of going back and bringing these new eyes on it, letting people go and look at it, because mathematically, he's there. And it's just a matter of getting the right set of eyes looking at the information to finish it up and ID.
Digital's on a roll. If you shoot and kill an intruder in your home, there is zero chance of them re-offending. And I like those odds.
I do too.
That sounds like something you'd say. It really does. All right, let's see here. Patricia, the Yorkshire Ripper was brought in 11 times for questioning. In the end, it was a rookie cop on patrol who saw a man and woman in a car arranging business.
Absolutely, and absolutely amazing. I didn't know it was 11 times, but like I said, I know that he had done certain things to avoid some of the DNA profiling and the contributions, but I didn't know he'd been spoken to 11 times. That's interesting.
Let's see here. Concrete J, you're going to go broke, bud, but we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Can't do it without you. Steve's eyes are trained to find the lies. My family and I are proud to be a part of the web.
Thank you, sir.
We're proud too.
I guess Concrete J
is a man.
A man.
We're thinking. We're going that way.
Yeah.
Let's see here. True crime with Marvin Frank. Steve, wonky is a great word to use. It's my new one because it sure fits it.
Art Fox has got a couple of good words I like to use now, but can't use them on our channel. I'll use them on his channel.
Okay. In digital, turns out Ellie was wrong about at least one thing in Delphi. Nothing can shock me now.
Well, and like I said, mistakes are made in all cases. Law enforcement, or human, and they're going to make mistakes, and you try to minimize the effects that those mistakes have, and hopefully it doesn't jeopardize this case, the mistakes that we know of and the mistakes that we don't know of. But we only can hope for the best.
In USA Libertarian, is the siloing, keeping information separate between local LE, FBI, and prosecutor a common procedure?
Bring it back up for a minute.
Siloing is keeping it separate.
Okay. Departmentalized, I guess, is what they're talking about.
Same thing.
Okay. You know, it may be departmentalized, but they should be at least one person that has access to each of that information that will make, and it shouldn't just be one person. It should be a group effort of people looking at that information, debating it, and what does it mean, and then analyze it and use that information that would progress the case best. But sometimes you do have jealousy among certain, and that's what I was talking about. Being competitive is one thing, but don't be competitive to the point that you don't share information that could help the case. And hopefully that's not the case in this. I have no idea, but hopefully that's not the case in this one.
In digital, that quote was either Grady Judge or a similar LE officer, pretty sure from Florida. That's funny. All right. And Alicia would love to know whose picture was sent in regards to page 70 of the interrogation from 8/19/2020. Possibly it is why police think it's TK.
Yeah, I don't know. There's so much information out there that we don't have all, and we're at a loss. Your blue light's on.
Uh-oh. It sure is.
She likes her blue light.
I think you're done.
All right, guys. We want to thank you for all y'all support and coming and watching the show tonight. Send out all your comments to us that you can. Send me some emails. Share this video as much as you can. Subscribe. We appreciate the support. It means a lot. And we've got a lot in the plans as we move forward with our channel, and trying to keep as much information, that's dedicated and that we are, that can have an impact and hopefully bring some focus to the case where someone may move the case forward with the right information. That's all we want to do, is try to have a positive impact. And once again, I want to thank all the mods out there that help Mrs. Steve with the show, all the volunteers. It just means so much to us. And but y'all have a safe weekend, and I'll see y'all. I think we're going to try to do another show on Tuesday night. And is there?
He likes his fishing.
Yeah, I go fishing on Wednesday nights, and the boat ramp's not full on Wednesday night, so I get to go.
Depends on the weather.
Yeah, and depends what's happening. But we'll try to get together Tuesday and have another good show for y'all. And if y'all have any information or anything you want me to look at, most certainly let me know. But y'all be safe out there, and I'll see you Tuesday.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.